the words we heard that Bob read this morning. Oh God, you have searched me and known me. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me. What does it mean for we who are in this room to sing these words, to read these words on the Bible, to hear them? Some of us have had very positive experiences of religion and spirituality. Many of us have not. And I guarantee you that in your row there are at least 3 people who have a religious background that is not anything like yours. All right. That these words that we pray and that we sing mean something different to each one of us. That God's presence in our lives, that God's healing power working through us and in us, that our walk with Jesus, our journey of spirituality is different for every one of us. And every one of us has a rich story to share. That's a huge part of what it means to be MCC. That when we fill the sanctuary, we have so many different experiences and questions, truths and doubts, healings to share, wounds we still carry. All of this we bring with us. And it is a huge part of the richness and blessing that we have to offer to one another and to our world. Which is why today, on this 5th Fellowship Sunday, as we celebrate BMCC, we're going to hear from 3 very different people who are going to share their testimonies with us this morning. And can I get a big old hearty amen to give them some fortitude? Amen. The first person, I'm going to introduce them all, and I'm going to sit down. The first person we're going to hear from, her name is Miriam Ortiz. And Miriam has been at the church now just within this last year. And she is a volunteer with our food pantry and is on a new team that we have working on Spanish language outreach. And I'll let her share more, but I want to just say that's who Miriam is. If you haven't had a chance to meet her yet, as you meet her today, I hope that you'll take a chance to get to know her better. The second person who will be sharing what? They're better. The second person who will be sharing is Jay Buliung. Jay is also fairly new to the church here in the last year. And Jay has quite a journey to share as well. And finally, we'll be hearing from Diane Reynolds. Diane has been here at MCC of the Palm Beaches for 6 years. And I know that you've seen Diane active in all kinds of ministries here, and she's going to tell us more about her journey. So I invite you this morning, I invite us all to open our hearts to what each of these folks has to share, for how it may be similar, for what we've experienced, for how it may be different, for how their story can be a blessing to us, because our stories, when we have the courage to share them and the courage to be vulnerable, are always a blessing. So will you welcome, please, our very first, very courageous speaker, Miriam Ortiz.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm so happy that Reverend Lea asked me to share my testimony today on spiritual healing. Not really. Really. Public speaking is not on my top 10 list, but I will give it my best. First, I'd like to say how proud I am to become a member of MCC, and here goes. I lost both my parents and most of my friends within a few short years. Then last November, my partner of 39 years and 11 months was removed from life support at my request. The night before she died, I was at the end of the proverbial rope, not knowing what to do. I felt so alone. I kept staring out the ICU window, looking down at the fountain in front of the hospital. I kept thinking over and over, what should I do? How do I end the life of someone that I love? Knowing that her greatest fear was happening to her, right in front of me. I just suddenly started to feel calm, and I didn't feel afraid, and I just knew what needed to be done. Was God with me that night? Today I can tell you that he was. He was leading me and he held me fast. The next day I called the hospice team in. They came quickly and her life ended peacefully. My role as a caretaker, nurse, and partner was over. I had few family members and fewer friends here in Florida. Zero connection to organized religion. Most important, I didn't feel that I had a strong connection to God. If you asked me if I prayed, I probably would have said no. I didn't know it at the time, but through Discipleship 101, I have begun to understand that I did pray. I just didn't acknowledge God's presence in my life. I kept telling myself, something has to change. Your life has to mean something more, but no clue on how to proceed. Then through dumb luck, divine intervention, which is what I believe, I clicked the link to MCC. I watched Reverend Leah's sermons online. I was moved. I was touched by them. I found the sermons to be relevant to my life. Church wasn't boring. What a surprise. Yet I didn't come right away. I hesitated. Then I decided I had to go, and it changed my life. The greeters made me feel welcome. I was thrilled to be able to listen to Reverend Leah's sermon. And I left thinking that day, maybe this is what I need. This is what I've been missing. So I decided to volunteer at the food pantry. I met the most amazing, hardest working people ever. Food pantry volunteers, you guys are awesome. I saw that all people from the community were welcome, not just LGBT. When you can make someone smile by giving them a favorite can of food, or a child gets a package of cookies, or someone gives you a hug, it melts your heart. I can honestly say, what I put in, I get it back 10,000 times over. Most important, during those times, I feel such a strong connection to God. I'm part of something meaningful, wonderful, and it's a good thing. I also signed up for Discipleship 101 under the guidance of Reverend Lea. We were asked to reflect on our lives, to understand our connection to God, to learn about the Bible, about prayer, ideas that I had never even considered. I also attended the bereavement classes led by the amazing Reverend Marion. After long and busy Sundays, she stayed to lead our group. And I think that I can speak for all of us that her kindness and wisdom really helped us to cope, to deal with our issues of grief and loss. I don't remember what day, I just only felt that I was on the right track. I was part of a wonderful church with awesome members. All the negative, unhappy feelings just started to fade from me. In conclusion, I will say that because God is so generous and loving, she left room in my heart to consider, to explore new beginnings. And I'm so grateful. I really feel blessed and I'm excited for the future. Thank you for listening.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jay Buliung. And Lea called me last week and asked me if I would participate in this morning's service, knowing that I just completed a very grueling treatment of radiation and chemotherapy. And seeing that this sermon is about God's healing, I said that I would be more than happy to. And while practicing this week, I said, no, I'm not going to get upset, but...
Yeah, we all been there.
Anyway, it all began about 4 years ago. I was on vacation in Connecticut with my favorite cousin, Debbie. And I happened to look down at my left thigh, and there was a little pinprick of a spot that most people would have probably dismissed. And so I squeezed it thinking it was just an ingrown hair. And a couple days later it was back. So I squeezed it again, and this went on for about 6 weeks or so. However, the tiny spot was growing. So when I came back to Florida, I went to my dermatologist, and he took a biopsy. And he called me back within a few days, and it was a really long name, ended in neoplasm. And I know that the neoplasm isn't a good thing. It's a rapidly growing mass, and it's related to cancer. So he said we need to excise this. So he made a cut on my left thigh, shape of a diamond, maybe 2 inches by an inch, and sent it in for pathology. Well, it turns out to be an extremely rare form of skin cancer related to the Muir-Torre syndrome. And I'm one of the lucky 250 people in the world with this syndrome. However, with this syndrome comes an 80% chance of getting colorectal cancer. So, 2 days later, I was in having a colonoscopy, and sure enough, they found a mass. So I was recommended to one of the best surgeons in South Florida, and I went in for surgery, and they removed the mass. I had a follow-up 6 months later. Well, 6 months later, I went back for follow-up, and the cancer had returned, the mass returned. So they recommended that I have a second surgery. So I had a second surgery. And I tell you, it's one of the most excruciating surgeries you could imagine. So the recovery was probably, I was on my back for about 10 days with each surgery. So having the second surgery, I went in for the pathology, and the mass had come back again. So they recommended another surgery. So after 3 surgeries, I went in after my third surgery, and it was 3 years ago, let me see, this past Christmas. And the week before Christmas, I went in to meet my surgeon, and as I nervously sat there, the surgeon came in, he entered the room, and he said, "Sir, I can't explain it, but you have no irregular cell irregularity and no malignancy." And I said, "Thank God." He said, "Have a wonderful holiday, and I'll see you in a year." So I said, "Yay, I'm healed finally." Well, fast forward a year. I went in for my follow-up colonoscopy, and the mass had returned. It was recommended that I have aggressive chemotherapy and radiation to kill the cancer. I had no idea how badly I would react to both. Now this brings me back to the angels. And I probably got off track because what angels? Well, I talked about how at the beginning, which I sort of got off script, that God shows up in many forms, and I think with me it was in the forms of angels. And there was an angel with me on that day at the beach because it was such a tiny spot. Like I said, most people probably would have dismissed it. Yet it was there, and I noticed it. And it was the early detection that saved my life. There were angels with me as I was admitted into the hospital. I became extremely dehydrated with the chemo treatment. And the first nurse that took care of me while I was in the emergency room gave me a crash course on how to take care of myself while I was there, because I had become neutropenic, new word that I learned, that my white blood cell had crashed and I was open to any sort of infection. So she gave me a crash course on how to take care of myself, to make sure that anybody who entered the room wore a mask and cleaned themselves. There was also a young nurse in training and her teacher, and she was completing her last week of internship. They were from Palm Beach Atlantic University, and they came in one morning when I was in total despair. I was sitting in the corner of my hospital room crying, and they asked if I wanted them to pray with me. And I jumped at the opportunity. Man, that young girl could pray as if she were Jeremiah. I immediately felt better. Also praying for me was this entire church, my choir friends, and prayer circles on Facebook who I didn't even know. There was my friend Gail, whom I recently reconnected after 41 years from graduating from high school. Gail had gone through the exact same cancer a year ago. That's no coincidence either. So she was my go-to person for telling me exactly what to expect almost on a day-to-day basis. Coincidence? I don't think so. And there was one very special angel who came into my life nearly 4 years ago. Derek Jones, my partner and friend, who woke up with me every morning at 5:15 for 30 days to take me to a 6:15 radiation treatment, which is a half-hour drive from my house. These people and many more came into my life precisely at the right moments, and not just coincidentally. To me, they were placed there by God to give me the spiritual and emotional support which I was in desperate need. This past May 13th, I had a CT scan to see if the treatment actually had worked. The next day, I met with my oncologist. With the results, I am clear. I thank all my angels, and I thank God, and I thank all of you.
When I was asked by Reverend Lea to talk about my blessing, I agreed instantly. But then I started thinking about it, and I almost called her back and said that maybe I should pass. But I didn't, because I thought that maybe someone could hear my story and relate to it. You see, I thought I was blessed, but I wasn't. I thought I had all the answers, but I didn't. My journey with alcohol and drugs began when I was a teenager and continued throughout my adult life. My blessings, though, came in 1983 when I had a spiritual awakening at a Catholic church in Pennsylvania. I was desperate the night before. I had a gun to my head, tears in my eyes, not knowing what to do. I was drunk, lonely, and done with life on this planet. Seconds before pulling that trigger, God spoke with me, telling me to get to a church. As I walked into the church the next morning, scared, tired, and totally a mess, I knelt down and blessed myself. And I remember looking up at the altar and asking God for help. Within seconds, a bright orange light shined in my face, and a voice whispered in my ear saying, "Finally you're here, asking for my help." I refer to this as my spiritual awakening and the blessings from my higher power that I refer to as God. That spirit took control of me for 45 minutes during that entire Mass, reflecting memories from my life with all my iniquities during my alcohol and my drug days. Most of the incidents were not pretty, showing me many times I was so drunk I would fall down. The many times I was driving on the wrong side of the road, closing one eye because I couldn't focus with both open. And other embarrassing times at events and parties. And then it opened my war box and escalated my behavior, my erratic behavior, and my erratic addiction. You see, the Marine Corps taught me to fire a rifle and discovered that I could hit targets from most distances. I qualified as expert. They trained me in many bases and sharpened my skills. And before long, I was flown to Southeast Asia to a country called Vietnam, where they gave me a supply of ammunition and a license to kill, and I did. After a year and a half in that hellhole, they sent me home with all the confusion and guilt. I was only 19. I discovered quickly that I didn't fit in normal society, and I was also very confused. I was so confused that within a few weeks, I wanted to return back to the war. I felt I belonged there. The drinking and drugs became part of my life to hide my bad memories. And over the years, I learned to put those warm memories in a box with a lid on it, opening it only when I wanted to. Then the box took control of me. The damage I did in Vietnam earned me a one-way ticket to hell, and I couldn't talk to anyone about it. My parents would have been ashamed if they knew the damage that I did, and the few friends that I had left would have abandoned me. I started drinking every day. As I left that church that morning, I was embarrassed. I knew I needed help, but I was so confused and scared, I didn't know what to do. Before starting my car again, I blessed myself and looked up to God and asked for help. And again, He did. He guided to me a phone where I called the number of Alcoholics Anonymous. I spoke with a man named Dennis, who invited me to an AA meeting that evening in a church basement. When I arrived, Dennis welcomed me in the parking lot. At first, I was reluctant to go into the meeting, not knowing what to expect. This was very embarrassing for me, but I found the courage to walk into that room, and within minutes, I knew that I belonged there. It was that evening that I started my journey to recovery. Within days, I found myself in a 28-day program at a local rehab. Then I started attending daily meetings with other wounded VA AA members. These were men and women just like me, bankers, salespeople, lawyers, truck drivers, and many other types of people, all in need of a blessing to break away from the sickness of addiction. Now I stand before you telling part of my story, thanks to a blessing that I received from God 32 years ago. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me.
And it's so important for us to hear one another's stories. Everyone in this room has a story. Thank you so much, Miriam and Jay and Diane, for the courage to be vulnerable and share with us. This is what being MCC is about. This is what church is supposed to be about. About hearing one another's stories and learning from one another about how God holds us and guides us and leads us. So whatever your story is here today, know that it is welcome. And that my prayer for us all is that we know that wherever we are in our story right now, we know that God is holding us and leading us and healing us, always, and always leading us closer and closer to wholeness. Hearing such amazing, powerful stories, like what do you follow that with? True. But I thought there might be one other thing we could do. And that is, we have a number of folks who are ready to join the church today, to take their next step in their spiritual journey. So we're going to welcome them into membership now, and then we're going to sing.